programs from Reach Beyond Australia. Life-changing radio. You reach beyond to us.
Hello and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program, researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson and in Los Angeles by Ray Robinson, and produced in studios at WRMI Shortwave in Okeechobee, Florida. I'm Jeff White. This is edition NWS857, released on Sunday, July 27th, 2025. This program today, KTWR Guam. A big blow to public radio and TV stations in the United States. And our South African DX report from Andre Hoos. Last month we learned the sad news that Transworld Radio's flagship shortwave station, KTWR, on the U.S. overseas territory of Guam in the Western Pacific, will be closing down at the end of October. So we thought it would be appropriate to review the nearly 50-year history of the very storied station that's had such an impact on the shortwave radio scene in Asia. Here's Ray Robinson in Los Angeles.
Thanks, Jeff. The Australian monthly magazine Radio and Hobbies for October 1975 gave the first notification that Transworld Radio, TWR, was planning to establish a twin broadcasting facility on the island of Guam. The highly honoured international radio monitor in New Zealand, the late Arthur Cushing, stated in his monthly column, Listening Around the World, that TWR had already received a licence for this new station, which would operate with 10 kilowatts on 770 kilohertz medium wave and with 2 shortwave transmitters at 100 kilowatts for coverage into Asia. At the time, Transworld Radio was in an era of expansive growth, and Arthur Cushing went on to state that this new Guam station would be their 5th radio broadcasting facility, after Monte Carlo in Europe, On Air in the Caribbean, Cyprus in the Mediterranean, and Swaziland, now Eswatini, in Africa. At this stage, TWR had already established an office facility in Agana, the commercial centre and seat of government on Guam. TWR planned that their first unit in Guam would be their new medium wave station, covering the local population, which is now about 170,000. The new shortwave station was constructed just a little inland from the town of Marizo, in the southwest corner of the island. 2 years after the first announcement, in June 1977, the new KTWR shortwave station was ready to go on the air with test transmissions, and at that stage the programming consisted entirely of test tones and test announcements. Transworld Radio issued a special QSL card acknowledging those initial transmitter tests. Regular program broadcasting began 3 months later, on September the 4th, 1977. By then, 2 100-kilowatt Harris transmitters, model SW100, were in use, with 2 TCI wideband curtain antennas. Transmitter KTWR1 was hardwired to antenna 1, which had a beam of 285 degrees, and KTWR2 was hardwired to antenna 2, which had a beam of 315 degrees. 3 years later, in 1980, Transworld Radio received FCC approval for the installation of 2 more 100-kilowatt shortwave transmitters, the same model Harris SW100s. At the same time, the transmitter building was enlarged to accommodate 2 additional units, and 3 curtain antennas were also installed. Test broadcasts from the new transmitters and antennas took place during the following year, 1981. In April 1999, a 5th transmitter and a 6th curtain antenna were installed. However, the 100-kilowatt transmitter on this occasion was manufactured by the HCJB facility located at Elkhart in Indiana. And then 2 years later, in 2001, the 2 early curtain antennas were replaced by 2 similar units with reflectors. Also, beginning around that time, the 2 early 100-kilowatt transmitters were removed and replaced by 2 higher-powered 250-kilowatt units, each with digital DRM capability. During the installation of the new high-powered transmitters, there was a rearrangement of transmitter locations within the building, and the earlier KTWR3 was removed for sale. In December 2002, one of the most devastating typhoons ever to hit the island of Guam, Typhoon Pongsona, unleashed its fury for a period of around 10 hours on Sunday evening, December the 8th. All of the wind speed indicators were destroyed by the high winds, though it's estimated that wind gusts reached as high as 190 miles per hour. This sustained and aggressive storm destroyed and damaged a huge number of houses and other buildings, and it completely interrupted the normal flow of business and other activities throughout the island. Schools were closed, radio stations left the air, highway traffic was completely suspended, and ships couldn't enter the harbour. At the beginning of the stormy events, an explosion started a fire at the oil storage tanks near the harbour, a fire which burned for 6 days before it could be extinguished. The roof was torn off the Micronesia Mall, long rows of concrete electrical poles were snapped at the base and overlaid the roadways, the island-wide telephone service was inoperative, the rain was so heavy that it was described as a whiteout, and heavy furniture was sucked out of houses, motor vehicles were flipped, and so the story went on. All flights to the island were cancelled or diverted, and due to the fire at the oil storage tanks, gasoline was rationed, with at one stage only government vehicles being permitted to buy gasoline. The cost estimate for the damage sustained at the international airport was $100 million. The sustained high winds caused considerable damage to both of the shortwave stations that were then on the island, KTWR and KSDA, which first went on the air in 1987. At KTWR, the typhoon completely destroyed 3 of the curtain antennas and severely damaged the other 2. The transmitter building also sustained a certain amount of damage, with salt water getting into 2 of the transmitters, KTWR2 and KTWR4. Among the immediate results of the extremely strong typhoon winds was that the roadway leading to the KTWR site was covered with debris and made impassable. There was no water at the transmitter site and no electricity. The cost estimate for all of the damage to the buildings and equipment at KTWR was at least $100,000, which was also the deductible amount for their insurance policy, meaning Transworld Radio had to raise that money themselves for the repairs. Amazingly, KTWR was off the air completely for only 3 days, while antennas and feed lines were repaired. The first transmitter to be reactivated was KTWR5, feeding into curtain antenna 5. And then, towards the end of the same week, KTWR2 was reactivated, feeding into antenna 4. Transmitters KTWR1 and 3 were also ready to go back on the air, but it would take several weeks before new antenna parts arrived from the United States, and the antennas were rebuilt. For the initial return to the air, the transmitters were powered solely by TWR's emergency generators. So for a temporary period, actually well into 2003, until all 5 transmitters and antennas could be reactivated, KTWR broadcast a modified schedule of composite programming with major segments chosen from each of their language services. Incidentally, Transworld Radio's medium wave station, KTWG, which had been operating on 801 kHz with 10 kilowatts, had been sold shortly before the typhoon hit to a Christian businessman. Over the years, many medium wave DXs in Australia and New Zealand had received QSL cards from KTWG while it was still under the ownership of Transworld Radio. Those cards are now considered to have real historic value. Friday, November the 11th, 2011 was an auspicious day for KTWR. On that date, a special dedication ceremony honoured the installation of new digital transmission equipment at the station, and a special quarter-hour programme in DRM mode marked the occasion. The first DRM broadcast was on 17640 kHz at 0900 UTC. The entire dedication ceremony was broadcast live from KTWR, and in addition, that special event programming was relayed throughout the United States via the several hundred FM and medium wave stations of the nationwide Moody Bible radio network. In more recent times, KTWR was involved in two interesting and significant radio experiments, in addition to the transmission of shortwave programming in DRM mode. Starting in 2013, Transworld Radio began installing 3 huge solar arrays for the generation of electricity at the rate of 60 kilowatt hours per day from each array. It's estimated that the energy production from that equipment has saved the station around $50,000 per year on electricity bills. And then in June 2016, one of the 250 kilowatt transmitters at KTWR was used to beam an experimental digital internet signal to Thailand that allowed the download of a complete Bible on a smartphone. Innovative uses of DRM like that have been a hallmark of KTWR in recent years, and it's been a source of significant frustration to them that the take-up of manufacturing and distribution of DRM receivers has been so slow. KTWR currently broadcasts 4 half-hour weekly programs in DRM mode, in English and Tamil to India, in Mandarin to China, and in Japanese to Japan, 3 countries where DRM receivers are now plentiful. TWR has said that their intention is to transfer all the current shortwave programming on KTWR to other broadcasters in the region. But what the fate of those DRM transmissions will be, we don't know. We do know that Mike Sabin from KTWR has been in Tashkent for the past few weeks, trying to improve the equipment there for the DRM transmissions to India. As soon as we get details of how the TWR programming will be redistributed, we will, of course, let you know. Transworld Radio's KTWR on Guam has always been a reliable verifier of listener reception reports from their office in Nagana and also directly from the station at its Merizo address. Over the past nearly 50 years, KTWR has issued a host of colourful QSL cards, mostly in English, but also at times in Japanese. Their QSL cards often depicted delightful island scenes in full colour. Back to you, Jack.
Thanks, Ray. Next week, Ray will be taking a look at the radio scene in the exotic tropical Indian Ocean island paradise of the Seychelles. Right now, let's go to South Africa. Here's Andre Hoos.
This is Andre Hoos with the 8th edition of the South Africa DX Report, coming to you from Johannesburg. My shortwave reception report follows for the end of June and the beginning of July. All signals were received in Johannesburg in a suburban area. On 21 June, BBC Midwinter broadcast to Antarctica from Aldabaya, UAE, on 5960 kHz from 2130 to 2200 UTC. Programming started with the words, "This is the BBC calling Antarctica." There was a flashback to earlier transmissions, as this was the 70th anniversary transmission. Full program received clearly, containing messages to scientists in Antarctica from family and friends in the UK. Music and commentary by Gary Matthews. SIO 454. On 25 June, Radio Dengigal from Bavar, Armenia, on 11510 kHz at 1527 UTC. Male voice talking, the word democracy was mentioned in Kurdish. SIO 454. NHK World Radio in Bengali from Yamata on 11655 kHz at 1532 UTC. Female voice talking about Israel and Iran, mention of CNN and Tomahawk missiles. SIO 555. Voice of Vietnam 1 in Vietnamese, domestic station from Hanoi on 11720 kHz at 1535 UTC. Female voice talking. SIO 454. Amhara State Radio from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on 6090 kHz at 1708 UTC. Male voice talking. SIO 252. KCBS Pyongyang from Gangye, North Korea on 6100 kHz at 1710 UTC. North Korean operatic style music backed by an orchestra. SIO 353. On 28 June, Radio Nakboy Sumui, a clandestine shortwave station to Burma from Oichun in Taiwan on 9670 kHz at 12:55 UTC. Female voices talking, followed by music. In male voice talking, station closing, and jingle. SIO 454. Radio Dengegel from Gavar, Armenia on 11545 kHz at 1725 UTC. Male voice talking with clips of a live meeting to an audience. SIO 454. Radio Taiwan International test broadcast in German to Europe from Tamsui on 9550 kHz at 1745 UTC. Male and female voices talking in German, mentioning that it is a test transmission. Request for reception reports. Email address provided. Taiwanese music. SIO 454. The other two test frequencies, 15145 and 11995 kHz, were not heard at my location in Johannesburg. 1 July, Myanmar Radio from Yangon on 5985 kHz at 1508 UTC. Music and female voice talking. SIO 353. On 6 July, NHK World Radio from Yamata in Chinese on 11910 kHz at 1540 UTC. Female voice talking. The Chinese word for China, Tsunghua, was heard clearly. SIO 555. On 8 July, Oromia National Media from Galbeni, Romania on 15425 kHz at 1525 UTC. Male and female voices talking. SIO 353, but strong fading. BBC World Service in Korean from Tashkent, Uzbekistan on 12005 kHz at 1552 UTC. Female voice talking. SIO 454. Radio Friday in Karsi from Aldabaya, UAE on 12035 kHz at 1535 UTC. Female voice talking. SIO 454. Voice of Korea in Arabic from Kujang on 11645 kHz at 1537 UTC. North Korean music in operatic style with orchestra. SIO 454. Same program and music also heard on 9890 kHz at 1540. SIO also 454. Radio Dengegel from Gavar, Armenia on 11550 kHz at 1538 UTC. Male voice talking with inserts from another male voice. SIO 454. KBS World Radio from Kimjai on 9785 kHz at 1543. In English, end of sport report with jingle, then entertainment section, talking about K-pop band Blackpink and their world tour. SIO 454. If you have any comments or would like to request a QSL for the South Africa DX report, you can contact me at andre9@duck.com. That is ANDRE, the number 9 at DUCK.com. Happy listening, everyone.
Thank you, Andre. We told you a few weeks back that the Trump administration in the U.S. has been trying to eliminate funding for public radio and TV stations in the country in order to cut government expenses and because of alleged liberal news bias at the two entities. The government wanted to do this by cutting off funds to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds NPR, National Public Radio, and PBS Television. Here's what NPR reported on July 17th.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Winter Johnston. The Republican-led House is preparing to vote on a measure that would make $9 billion in cuts to previously approved funding for public broadcasting and foreign aid. The rescissions package passed the Senate last night.
Well, that bill was also passed by the House, and as we record this, it's sitting on the president's desk, awaiting a signature, which will surely come shortly. So public radio TV stations across the United States are quite worried.
Paul
Paul Walker is the only full-time staff member at public radio station KSKO-FM in the small town of McGrath, population less than 300, in the extreme interior of the state of Alaska. Paul, by the way, is also an avid shortwave listener. Here's what Paul wrote recently to his congressional representative, Nick Begich.
I am Paul Walker, the program director for KSKO. And in rural Alaska, we don't have internet on cell phones. The network out here is 2G. Some still don't have, and some don't even want the internet or smartphones for various traditional and cost reasons. But what do they have out here in every household? A radio. KSKO in rural McGrath is about 275 people, about 250 miles northwest of Anchorage. We serve very small remote villages on the lower Yukon, lower Kuskokwim, and upper Kuskokwim rivers, whose population is predominantly older. Radio is a very important habit and tradition for them. They have formed a relationship with us for over 40 plus years, and they trust us. If CPB funding is eliminated, it would devastate KSKO. Why, you ask? We derive 60 to 70% of our operating budget from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting Funding. I am the only full-time staff member at the station with a part-time announcer and 2 remote contract staff. Through all of that, we still manage to provide exemplary service on KSKO. We've been on the air at all hours of the day and night when towns are flooding at river breakup as the water starts moving again after the winter. We've been on the air whenever needed to bring wildfire information to our residents when towns are being threatened. When a town began to flood at 10 p.m. at night, I was on the air for a couple hours. People might be winding down the night or laying in bed, but they have radios on. When people woke up the next day and realized how bad the flooding was and that it kept going, I was on the air, on and off, for 9 hours, providing vital information as the situation continued to change. In situations like that, even if people have internet and cell phones, they don't have the time or concern to be searching the web and social media as they clean muck off their living room floor and move furniture or throw out stuff that was damaged. When a wildfire is so close to a community, visibility is less than a mile, they don't have time to be searching Google or social media for stuff. They have to protect their property, but can listen to radio with earbuds or on a big speaker while they work. When our community was dealt a 1-2 punch here in McGrath with 2 deaths in the same weekend, one from that now infamous Bering Air crash, and one from a 6-year-old dying under questionable circumstances, we had a mental health professional on the air the next day to talk about coping with loss. When phone service on landlines and cell phones fail, as it so regularly does out here, often rendering cell phones and landlines completely inoperable to even reach 911, KSKO plays a critical role in letting people know about the outage and what to do in the interim when an emergency may arise, while also playing public megaphone and passing along urgent messages. With the loss of CPB funding, my position would be eventually eliminated, and so would just about all of our local programming and that life-saving information. Residents would have nowhere to turn for any of that. Social media and the internet are great as additional tools for the radio station, but could never come close to approaching what we offer. Information that you trust from people you know. People and information that are accurate. KSKO has a 44-year legacy of being the only source of information. And despite having little staff, I continue that because people depend on us. I am Paul Walker, the station's program director, and I am grateful to Wavescan for the time to tell our story.
Those words from Paul Walker show just how important public broadcasting funds are to small stations like his in rural areas of Alaska and other parts of the U.S. Paul says KSKO could have to go off the air within the next 2 years or so if no new funding is found.
Serving the Western Interior for more than 40 years. Your trusted home for news and entertainment. This is KSKO, McGrath, KSKC, Crooked Creek, KSKP, Sleepy, KGYA, Gray Lake, KMGS, and JNKO, Sheglo, KNIB, Nittany, KLOP, Holy Cross. Streaming worldwide at KSKOPublicRadio.com. And don't forget to like us on Facebook, KSKO 89.5. Out in McGrath where the rivers flow, there's a voice on the airwaves that you all know. Paul Walker's the name, but they call him a nerd. Spinning those tunes you probably heard.
And we end Wavescan today with the Paul Walker song from KSKO in McGrath, Alaska. Thanks for listening to Wavescan, the international DX program researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson and in Los Angeles by Ray Robinson. Next week, the Seychelles. Ray and I will talk about the recent NASB meeting in North Carolina and our Japan DX report from Yuki Kotsuji. Wavescan is heard weekly in the Americas from WRMI in Florida and WWCR in Tennessee, across Asia, Australia, and New Zealand on Reach Beyond Australia, on Voice of Hope Africa from Zambia, and in Europe on IRRS Italy. Please send reception reports directly to any of those stations. Podcasts of this program are available through wavescan.podomatic. That's PODOMATIC.com. Your comments or suggestions are always welcome. Just email Ray or me using the address wavescan@yahoo.com. I'm Jeff White at WRMI Shortwave in Okeechobee, Florida. Till next week, good listening, everyone.
We're always wanting more. In a world so fast-paced, he slows it right down, finding joy in the simple. He's the talk of the town. Listeners tuning in, can't resist his charm. With every broadcast, he'll keep you warm. Now the story he shares, we're always wanting more. So turn up the dial, let the music play. With Paul on the mic, it's a great, great day. Every note and every rhyme, a melody heard. He's the life of the party, our beloved radio nerd.
Thank you for tuning to Reach Beyond Australia. Join us again tomorrow evening at 1400 UTC or 7:30 p.m. India Standard Time on this same frequency of 11870 kHz in the 25-meter band.